What's going on, MMA fans? Let's have the talk today. Let's go ahead and get into this. This is G here at MMA Hype Watch, and today I'm going to have to tell you that UFC rankings, UFC belts in this current day and age do not matter. They're not worth anything. They are just temporary placeholders. And the reason I'm going to go ahead and say this today is because look at the current fights that are being made by the UFC. UFC 250, Henry Cejudo versus Jose Aldo for the championship belt. I'm not going to go ahead and say that Jose Aldo doesn't deserve championship fights. Jose Aldo could definitely be a champion again, but the UFC giving fighters championship fights on 2-fight losing streaks is completely mind-blowing, to MMA hardcores. I'm going to say like myself, because they have legit contenders sitting around waiting in the rankings. I mean, Petr Yan Marlon Moraes could have got another shot. I mean, Aljamain Sterling could have got a shot at the championship belt. I mean, there are people waiting in this line to get these championship shots, and the UFC is handing out championship shots to fighters who are on 2-fight losing streaks. I mean, let's talk about the other person, Israel Adesanya versus Yoel Romero. Yoel Romero can definitely be a champion, and apparently the UFC wants Yoel Romero to be a champion so bad that he gets so many championship shots, you might as well just call him Frankie Edgar. That's no dig at Frankie Edgar, by the way, because Frankie Edgar usually fights his way into a championship fight. There's a comparison there. But let's see. There's still Jared Cannonier. He could have definitely fought for a championship fight against Israel Adesanya. I mean, it's very possible. So tossing out, championship fights to fighters who are on 2-fight losing streaks it's just not a good look. It just tells other fighters who are in the rankings that they're just temporary, placeholders, that these are just glamour ranking. And in this year, 2020 alone, I think fighters just have to look at this and they have to decide, like, hey, what is my ranking for? Like, what's even the point of having a ranking if the UFC is going to allow fighters to basically bypass rankings and fight, some of these people who are below me on the ranking or are on losing streak. Fighters at this point in time, you should use that as leverage to basically get fights that you want. You should use that as leverage to basically, create your own super fights. Create your own fights that are going to draw attention to you, that's going to basically, get you that spotlight, get you the money. Because apparently the way that the UFC is currently going, it's basically turning into a WWE money show. I hate to say that because I love the UFC, and seeing it going the way that it's currently going, it's slightly heartbreaking, but I guess that's just how business is. Business evolves, business grows, according to the majority of who their customers are. And the majority of who their customers are, MMA fans that want to see these big fights. They want to see these super fights. They want to see these grudge fights. They want to see these, highlight, spotlight fight. And with the UFC giving them those fights, the UFC is getting rewarded with tons of money. And fans, or the majority of fans, are getting these amazing stylistic fights and everything that are putting them in their seats. The UFC is listening, but in the same instance, the UFC is hurting its legitimacy as a rank-based MMA organization, as an organization that gives fighters shots that deserves it. I am in no way trashing any fighter on the roster because, let's be honest, like, any fighter on this roster will trash most anybody who actually trash talks them in real life. Like, let's be serious here. Like, let's be real. So I'm not trash talking any of the fighters. I'm just saying, as an organization and everything, the legitimacy might be hurt, but then fighters have to take this as a signal for what it is. Rankings don't matter. Belts don't matter. What any matchmaker says is going to happen does not matter until they get it. Fighters at this point need to take their rankings. They need to take their spots. They need to take their highlights. They need to take all of that into their own hands, and they need to leverage that, whether it be on social media, whether it be in blog format, whether it's in, some other form of business. They need to leverage that, and then they need to go ahead and they need to start building, their own businesses, their own things that drives attention towards them, just in the case that the UFC stiffs them. I'm going to use one of my favorite fighters, Jorge Masvidal, as an example. Going into 2019, he was on the skid. He was on a losing streak. Going into 2019 and everything, like, people weren't talking about Jorge Masvidal. People weren't like, oh, game bred street Jesus. They weren't saying nothing about that about him. Jorge Masvidal has always been a fighter. He's always been a highlight fighter. Win, lose, or draw. And then 2019 happens, and now everybody's talking about Jorge Masvidal. Jorge Masvidal is making tons of money. Jorge Masvidal, has the BMF belt. Jorge Masvidal even has his own liquor company now. Go check it out. Jorge Masvidal is the blueprint of what UFC or any MMA fighter should be out there doing, because a stellar year is not guaranteed to you. The UFC giving you these highlight money fights is not guaranteed for you. And MMA fans have to realize that if MMA fighters, UFC fighters, whichever, decide to go completely off script and they start, taking their own social media into their own hands, they start taking their own branding into their own hands, and they start doing all these things, that this is the new market. This is the way that the new market is supposed to go. This is the way the new market is for fighters and organizations. I mean, there's legit, tournament-based, MMA organizations out there like Bellator, like the PFL, and they're running amazing tournaments, and they're putting on amazing fights as well, if MMA fans still want legitimacy. But if we're talking about pay-per-views, if we're talking about mainstream, if we're talking about Madison Square Garden type, MMA fights and everything, you're more than likely this year alone going to be watching very closely to the UFC. And MMA fans and UFC fighters both have to take a step back and look at where the market is going, and they're just going to kind of have to accept it. Because let's be honest, I will watch Israel Adesanya fight Yoel Romero. I will also watch Henry Cejudo fight Jose Aldo. I'm going to be very honest. I'm not going to lie. I will watch it. I can't say that for the same for, the rest of, the guys and girls here working at MMA Hype Watch. I will watch it, though. I hate to say it, but that's just the way it goes. Is it fair? No, it's not fair at all. But this is the new reality that us as MMA fans and UFC fighters are living in, and we just kind of got to adapt to it and just deal with it so far. Until there's some type of petition put out, or, UFC fighters like form a union, but we know that's not going to happen, right? But this is G here. I'm fired up. This is just a topic that I just had to talk about here and just kind of get what you fans have to say about this. I have to get what you fans think about this type of stuff going on in the new year, in this new decade, 2020, for the UFC. Do you think this is a good thing? Do you think this is a bad thing? And for the UFC fighters out there, like, what do you think? Give us your thoughts. Give us your comments. Argue with us. Just give us what you think. Like, I seriously want to know. I mean, while you're here, go ahead, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube, hit the follow button on our Instagram, turn on notifications and everything. Help us out, help us grow, so we can continue to get out the word and not be censored like some other MMA media out there. I hate to say it, but yeah, we're not censored. We're going to say what we have to say. It's 2020. We can't wait to see what MMA has in store for us. We're excited. We appreciate you fans. Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope to bring you more content for you all to listen to. So until next time, this is G here with MMA Hype Watch. Until next time, we're out.